Hi, so this video is going to be all about being triggered and how we can handle that. Um, and what I want to propose is that there's actually nothing wrong with being triggered. It's a perfectly normal part of life. It's a normal part of healing, particularly after something traumatic has happened. And because all of our emotions and our feelings and sensations are safe and are transitory and are temporary, um, if something triggers us emotionally, even into a really strong reaction, it's totally okay. Now, it may not seem that way, and particularly if you are someone who struggles with anxiety, which is the example that I'm going to talk through today, because I think, particularly if we feel anxious about a certain thing, a certain topic, that can mean that we can really not want to be triggered by that thing, and so we avoid being exposed to the thing, and our life just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So I want to talk through an example of this because I always think that it's so much easier to understand what I'm pointing to in this understanding through an example than it is for me just to sit here and explain how it's working. So what I want to start with is starting with the story. So I'm going to talk about when one of my dogs got hit by a car, had an accident, and I just want to say up front that he survived. Okay, so that if, in case, particularly if you're a dog lover, if you're listening to this story and thinking, "Oh my God, did he die?" By some miracle, he didn't die. So I just want to say that up front. So a couple of years ago, so we've got two dogs, two small dogs, and I was out walking them on my own on our usual route around the block. And our youngest dog was about 9 months old, so he was still a puppy. And on the usual route, I was just walking them as normal. He's very pulley on the lead, and I don't know how it happened. I still to this day don't know how it happened. The lead slipped out of my hand. He pulled, and before I knew it, within a split second, he was in the road. A car had hit him, and then he kind of came scrabbling back over to me, and obviously had the other dog with me. So this was obviously a very traumatic experience, and I'm going to talk you through it so that I hopefully can illustrate how we as human beings are absolutely designed and built to handle this kind of stuff, both in the moment and over the long term, and how also the healing process from that, if we allow it, if we don't let the mind take over around it, the healing process just takes care of itself. So, obviously, at the moment of the accident, I then obviously got him to a vet, and he then went off to a hospital where he was for a month. And in that day of the accident and the next few days after the accident, my mind kept replaying it. So I would just be going about my normal day. Well, I mean, I actually wasn't going about my normal day in the 48 hours afterwards, because I was obviously in a state of shock and I had to allow myself to process that. But my mind kept showing me images of the accident, and I would immediately cry or feel really upset. And over the course of like a week or two, what I noticed was the mind presenting the image of him having the accident, of being hit, of the moments afterwards, got less and less and less. And to the point now where, for example, I think because I was thinking about recording this video, I woke up in the night and I had the image of that happening in my mind. And it was just a very small flicker of emotion. Really, what I felt was just sadness that it had happened to him, because I do still feel sad that it happened to him. And he had loads of surgery that he had to have, and it was very traumatic. And it was touch and go whether he was going to survive. Um, but obviously, in the immediate aftermath of it, my emotional reaction was much stronger to my mind presenting this mental image of it having happened. I had lots of body sensations. I felt sick. I felt anxious. As I say, I would burst into tears just spontaneously. I felt really sad. I felt very low. But over time, that has gone from now to 2 years later. The mental image can come into my mind, and it's just a feeling of sadness. So there isn't the panic there anymore. There isn't the anxiety there anymore. It's just moved through because, crucially, I think I have allowed it to be there, because I understood that when my mind was showing me this mental pattern, it was part of the healing process. So that's one part of it, how the healing of the actual traumatic event happens on its own. And that does mean, I think, often some replaying of it in the mind so that the mind can process it, so that the mind can forget about it in essence and kind of put it into the rather than being in the forefront of the mind, it puts it more towards the back of the mind. And then the second example within this story that I want to talk about is how I then had to get back to walking the dogs. So obviously in the first month after the accident, as I say, the dog who'd had the accident was in hospital. So that just left our other dog to walk. And obviously my husband also walks the dogs. But I knew a few days, I can't remember exactly how long it was, a few days after the accident happened, I knew, because I understand how the mind works, that if I didn't walk our other dog, there was the potential that my mind was going to make that into something that was a really big mountain to climb, that was something that was really anxiety producing, that would trigger me to have all of the thoughts and feelings about the accident, and that it could become something that I then avoided. So I think if we look at it, that if I had just been if I didn't have, thank God, the understanding that I have about how the mind works, and I was just in the experience of having had this traumatic event and then looking to get back to something, walking the dogs, I think I'm almost certain I would have avoided it. I think I would have said, certainly for many months afterwards, I'm sure I would have said to my husband, no, you've just got to walk the dogs now. But I knew that that was a potential and I didn't want that to happen. So I knew that I had to get back to walking our other dog. And the first time that I took her out for a walk, I was absolutely had an anxiety, stress reaction going through my body just at the thought of it. And so as I was putting her harness, sorry, she's sitting on my lap. Um, as I was putting her harness on, I noticed myself double, triple checking it. I felt my heart was pounding. I felt a bit sick. I felt a bit sweaty. I was having an absolute anxiety, stress response in the moment. Now, if I had believed the story that was attached to that, which was obviously what my mind was trying to do, was protect me and the dog from having another experience of them being hit by a car. Now, logically, of course, I know that the chances of her being hit by a car is close to zero, probably. But my mind wasn't feeling that. It was feeling the trauma from the recent accident. It was hoping to prevent it, didn't want us to have to go through all those strong emotions again. And so it was presenting consciously and subconsciously, this is a dangerous thing. And so so if I had believed that story, I wouldn't have walked her. But because I know that this story was then attached to this anxious feeling, so we've got sensation in the body, heart pounding, triple checking things, sweaty palm, feeling a bit sick, with the story attached, this means we're going to have an accident. If I wasn't able, thank God, to be able to separate those two out, I would have been stuck in feeling triggered and thinking, I can't handle this. So on the first walk that I did with her, I was tense, poor thing. I was anxious the whole way around. And when I got home, I burst into tears, which is just a total normal release of the emotion. And then the second time I walked her, pretty much a very similar response, but I didn't cry when I got home. And then the third time that I walked her, I noticed I was a bit more settled, but still feeling really anxious. And I just kept doing this. So in effect, what I was doing, and this isn't about, because I'm not a trained psychologist, this isn't about like exposure therapy and that you just have to, expose yourself to whatever it is that's triggering you. What I'm trying to point to here is that the emotional feeling of all of that anxiety of walking her, what that was telling me was it was absolutely nothing to do with walking her. It was to do with the story that my mind was presenting to me about it, which is, this is a dangerous thing, which of course I know it isn't. This means that she could have an accident. This could happen again. This is something that now we have to be really hyper vigilant about. None of that is true. So what the anxious feeling is telling me is not the likelihood of my dog having an accident. The anxious feeling is telling me about the state of my mind. And because I knew that, and I know that, I was able to be with the experience, to be with the trigger, to be with all of the really strong feelings. And it was really uncomfortable. I'm not saying I enjoyed it at all, but I just knew that my body and my mind was designed to handle this, that it was temporary, that my system, once I got home, would calm down, and that this was part of the healing process. And now, 2 years later, I don't have any anxiety about walking them. Now, obviously, it didn't actually take 2 years, but I don't have any strong anxious feelings about it. Now, when I'm out walking them down that same road where he had his accident, my mind still presents some thought about it. Consciously and subconsciously, I can feel it. It still kind of sometimes says, oh, this is the point where he was hit by the car, or this is the road, or do you remember when that happened? There's still some reference to it, and I just know that that's going to show up as long as it needs to show up. It might always show up when I'm on that road. Who knows? In 20 years' time, it probably won't. But what I'm saying is this is not a problem. This is just what a mind is going to do, because minds are designed only, they don't care about how we feel. They are designed to protect us, to scan for danger, to predict danger, and to keep us safe from that. And walking the dog became something dangerous to my mind. So, what I'm hoping that this example is showing is that if there is something, even if it's been traumatic, that you have been exposed to, or something where you've got a specific thing that your anxiety really kicks up about, that if we can separate that the sensation, the emotional, anxious feelings, and the sensation in the body that happens, if we can notice when that is happening and then notice the story that the mind is telling about it and separate out the two, then we can absolutely, because we know 100% that the anxious feeling in the body is not telling us, is not predictive of the possibility of that thing happening. It is only telling you about the state of your mind. Then we can be with any trigger. I don't massively like that word, but that's okay. It's what we're going to use. We can be with anything where the body-mind system responds in a way that feels like anxiety. And okay, and also if you're listening to this, you might also say, well, what about if it's not something specific? What about if it's just like a generalized anxiety? So if there's a generalized anxiety, the thing that we can then know is still there's some story being played out in the mind. We're feeling it in the body. But what we can know is that if it isn't happening now, then it is pure imagination. And this is true of anything to do with anxiety. If it is not actually happening now, it is in the imagination. And if it is in the imagination, then it's not going to hurt us. And that's where the anxious feeling in the body, the sensations that we often really don't want, that's what they're responding to. They are responding to the imagination. They are responding to the what if that happens. Because remember, the mind cannot tell the difference between something that's in our imagination and something that's happening in reality. The body will respond to whatever story the mind is telling. So, what I want to leave you with is that the process of healing from things that have been difficult is built into the system. When we can separate out the body sensation from the story, things become much more easier to navigate and manage. And that all of the strong feelings that you may have when you're dealing with something that makes you feel really anxious are 100% safe. You are designed to handle them, and they are temporary. They are going to pass. And a final thing, if you're watching this and anxiety isn't your thing, but maybe some other strong emotion is feels like it's triggered by something, anger, jealousy, resentment, the same is also true. It is 100% true of all of our emotions. I've just chosen anxiety because I had a good example in my life, and because anxiety is something that I used to really struggle with. But the same is true if we think that there's something that triggers resentment or triggers anger. It's never that. There's always a sensation in the body that we don't enjoy, and then a story attached to it. And it's getting really clear on that story is made up by the mind and is not the truth, is not reality. is that's when we can get really clear and be with these feelings in a completely different way. So if you've got any questions about this, please do leave them in the comments for me. I would encourage you to check out my freebie, which talks about strong emotions and anxiety in a really new and different way. And if you want to work one-to-one, then have a look below and check out my program Unbound. Thanks so much for watching this. Bye.